Hi everyone, and welcome to another class on graphic design made easy. And we've had at least two classes before now. We've talked about Photoshop as a software to explore, and also graphic design itself as a discipline for you to begin to understand the fundamentals and the principles that make graphic design graphic design. And if you missed previous classes, definitely go back to them so you can follow through. It's what we are right now. Because dropping this internet class might be so forward for you. So taking the past classes and watching them to refresh your memory would be advisable for you to do. Right. So, but regardless of that, I welcome you once again to another class on graphic design made easy. And in our previous class, we had it all on the fundamentals of graphic design, and I shared with you a couple of these principles. Or let me just say them for now, just to portray that point. And we shared it as simplified as much as possible. Right. And tonight we'll be continuing the disciplines of graphic design. Tonight we focus majorly on the principles of graphic design. And without further ado, let's get into it. But before that, of course, I would like to know your name once again and where you're connected from tonight. I like to just familiarize myself with people that we have on each live session, right? So let's have that being done in the comment section right now, to your name and where you're connecting for tonight. Now, let's get into tonight's class and begin to see what we have for tonight. I titled tonight's class Graphic Design for Beginners Part 2 because previously we had Part 1, which is fundamentals, and tonight we're looking at the principles. Okay. So remember in the last class we went through a couple of the fundamentals. We went through line, shape, color, texture, and then space. And I mentioned that fundamentals, majorly the summary, is that they are building blocks of any design, and just like you have ingredients for you when you want to cook and some other things like that, is ingredients for you to craft any design you have in your mind or you've seen out there that will let you do something similar to what you've seen. So fundamentals are very, very key. And continuing this light, moving to principles tonight, principles of graphic design. And we have about 6 of them tonight to look through. And we have balance, contrast, emphasis, repetition, incorporation, and alignment. Now, or before we get into that, as I mentioned before, fundamentals are the ingredients, right? So principles are the recipe. So of course, if I want to cook a particular delicacy, beyond me having the ingredients on ground, your recipe is very, very important, because I can decide to want to cook fried rice and have oil, have rice, have all these instruments, well, let me say ingredients now, and I just put everything at the same time into my pot, right? That will not give me fried rice. At best, I will just fry my rice. Well, I won't get fried rice as a delicacy carry point. So principles are what allows you to combine these fundamentals in the right proportion and in the right manner, and also structurally as well, right? For example, if I want to cook rice, I don't put rice first, I put water first. Get my point? So principles are what makes you know what to do per time. Okay, so how you use your fundamentals and how you have them in proportions and in the right manner. So that's what we're looking at tonight. Okay, I'm very excited for tonight's class, because once you have this knowledge about the principles, you can do almost anything in the world of design and even the creative world, because this applies to many disciplines when it comes to visual communication and visual arts. Okay, so let's get into tonight's class. Principles of graphic design. Now, the first one is balance. We started from there. So principle 1 is balance. The balance is very simple to understand. Balance is the distribution of visual weight in a design. Okay, balance is the distribution of visual weight in a design. Now, think of if you've seen one of these people that walk in marketplaces, whereas you see them balancing trays on their head, and without them having to hold it, it's because they understand where the highest weight is or the larger weight is, and then they put it on their head in that manner, so they doesn't fall off. If they shift where that balance is, it will fall off. So you have to calculate practically where the balance is, and then put it on their head in that manner. Same thing when it comes to design. Yes, it's what is called balance, right? And I will show you 2 examples to portray this point. But majorly, we have 2 major types of balance. You have symmetrical balance, and that's just fancy word for what you have is same on both sides. Okay, for example, if I give a circle and I divide it by a single line that goes through the middle, right? Both sides will be equal. That's symmetrical. Okay, and asymmetrical is different but balanced. So asymmetrical is still balanced, but it's different. I'll show you. I'm pretty sure to what I'm trying to say right now. But asymmetrical is what is used mostly now, because it's dynamic and it's modern. It's not just the boring. It has to be the same thing on both sides. So asymmetrical gives you the autonomy of being dynamic in how you express your design. So I want to get into that right now. Now, this is what this can look like for you. So we have the symmetrical at the left hand side right now, and then you have asymmetrical design at the right hand side, and you see from the smaller illustration I put by each of the design, just to show you what the blocks, the building blocks of what the designs are, because I mentioned before that fundamentals are your building blocks, but principles are how you actually apply the fundamentals. So of course, in these designs now, you have the colors, you have the text, which are fundamentals, and they are the building blocks of the design. And I just decided to summarize those text and everything into blocks, like you see the image beside each of the designs, right? And you see that at the left hand side, everything is just right down the middle. But you see that you have like equal spaces and equal options at each side, compared to the other, which is at the far right, whereby your structure is like the spacing are like very far apart from each other. It's not like it's the same thing. You can almost not calculate what is it like for the next element that's coming up. So from the logo to the text to the next text to the imaging is very, very different, but still is balanced. Okay, so that's like how it might look like for you. So it's not just enough to understand how to do symmetrical, but also the theory enough to explore the symmetrical balance. It's up to you to understand that these things are all for you to test. Okay, and when it comes to asymmetrical, it might not work at once. You have to just find the balance and just key what you want to do into that particular balance. Because at the end, for safety, of course, you can just go with symmetrical balance most time, just right down the middle and just get into the alignment also. I'll get into alignment later, but just for now, the essence of this point is for you to look at, okay, am I going to just keep everything balanced on both sides, so both on the left hand side and the right hand side, or just let me just explore and just move things along and see where the balance can be. I think go with that. It's up to you to explore. But the more you do these things, the better you get. Okay, and that's how it works. Now, moving to the next principle tonight is contrast. So we already talked about balance as the first principle. Second one we're looking at tonight is contrast. And the contrast majorly itself makes elements stand out and making them different from each other. That's like the whole concept of contrast, right? When you come to design, you have to understand that contrast is very, very big. A big principle that you can all joke with. And I'll show you what that can look like in the good way and the bad way. So contrast is very, very, very important. Now, for example, if you have a black vehicle now and you park it in a parking lot that is free with white cars, it's easy for you to spot it. Rather than if you have your white car parked in a car lot or car park with white vehicles, it's quite hard for you to spot it. It's very hard, like probably have to press your remote control, something like that, for you to get alert from the car, so know where the car exactly is. But if you have just a black car amongst like 10 other white cars, it's easy to spot. You get my point? Same thing with design, right? You have to have contrast. And even looking at this particular slide I'm using for this class right now, you can see the white contrast of the text is very, very workable with the black background or the darker background that we have right now. Same adjacent color, alright? And this just make everything look nice and look easy for you to read and for you to grasp everything I'm talking about part time. And then just for extra example or extra illustration, I have these two images. Now both of them says designer on a background, very simple background, very simple design. Okay, but for the left hand side, it's easy for you to know that what says is designer and it's not harsh for your eyes. You get the information clear. What is clear? Nothing is disturbing your eyes, or you're trying to wrap your head around what the text actually says. But looking at the right hand side, which also says designer, right? The color of the text is fighting with the color of the background. Both of them are not in sync, right? The harmony is not balanced. Okay, so this is what you want to do in your design. Not to ensure that as much as possible, the contrast of your text, the contrast of your images with the background is not fighting with each other, right? That's what contrast helps you to balance. So that's the principle of contrast, right? And majorly for you to create contrast, as I mentioned, just an extra note is for you can do that with size, you can do that with color, with font width, and with shape differences. For the example I just showed right now, I used the principle of contrast with the shape, with size and also with color. Right, for the designer, it's quite big. If it's a smaller text, may not see it very fast. Or the text is big, enough for you to read, and also the color is not the same thing as the background or similar to the background, so you can see the text very fast. That's the principle of contrast. You play simple as possible. Hope you get me. And I'm trying to use very, very simple examples so you can grab the concepts. Because once you understand the concept, you can apply it to bigger or more complicated pieces and see exactly what is being done per time. That's the whole essence of this thing. Okay. Now, quickly, let's move to the next principle, which is emphasis. The principle 3 is emphasis. Emphasis creates a focal point. the first thing viewers notice. Now, you understand that when it comes to designs, right, communication, as I mentioned before, is very, very key. We communicate visually when it comes to design, and emphasis is one of the key principles we use to do this. Now, as I mentioned before, emphasis helps to create a vocal point. What are you wanting your peers to notice first? That's the older sense of emphasis. Now, if you look at a group photo now, and people probably are wearing dark suits and probably the groom. Let's say, for example, yeah, like a wedding group photo now with the groom and his groomsmen, right? Let's assume the groomsmen and the pressman, none of them are wearing dark suit or dark shade of suit, right? And the groom decides to wear like a brighter color, right? Of course, the groom will stand out than every other person because of the color, right? And of course, the emphasis will be on the groom because it's usually going to be in the middle, right? So that's like how it works. So emphasis is you trying to highlight one key alone. In this case, the groom is the highlight. Same thing for if it's the bride and the bridesmaid. The bride is the focus, and other people are just supporting that particular image. So it's the same thing. You can do that and be applied for that also in the world of design, okay? Such that you can make this bigger, bolder, or different in color to create emphasis. Let me show you what that looks like. Now, let's look at this particular image for me to make more illustrations about reciprocal emphasis. This particular image right now, there's a particular order, whether you like it or not, right? The large text you see is read first is what you probably read first. Then you read, the pastor says, then beat this. Then you read this next. Then you probably read the tiny one that's at the top most, which is species. You read this last, most like. My point is that in every sort of design expression, you most likely have something going on, a sort of emphasis, because obviously in this particular design, the emphasis is the part that says read this first, another part just follows. You understand? So this is how you can add emphasis to what you're trying to communicate in every sort of design you're working on. It can be text, it can be a certain image, right? It can be a certain shape, it can be anything. Just spot it. Otherwise, you like to put emphasis on, make it larger, or probably change the color. So as I mentioned, its tip is for you to either make important elements bigger, bolder, or different color to create emphasis. That's how the principle works when it comes to graphic design. And then moving on from emphasis, let's look at the next principle, which is repetition, right? Repetition is the next principle, and repetition majorly is you creating consistency and unity by using elements throughout a design. And this can be seen in even everyday life, right? You see a couple of Ankara print materials that you probably wear or you've seen of people, right? You see patterns repeating over and over again around that particular material. And similarly, even the playboard and even the design, right? You have that principle being emphasized. Especially when it comes to even branding, you will see brands like Coca-Cola, the red they are using as a color is consistent across all their touch points. And when I say touch points, I talk about like around their social media, their websites, their outlets, their depot, even their company locations. You see red being used across, and even their products also, you see the colors being used, and even their logos also is repetitive, right? It's not because they cannot choose any other products, because they want to ensure that it's state of mind when that particular color comes around, okay? And same to many other brands you see out there, or you've not also actually used, or you currently experience the portal. That's how it works. The world of branding does not survive without consistency and repetition. It's a very, very key principles when it comes to good design and even beyond design, okay? Very, very key. And how do you do this? Of course, as I mentioned before, you can use repetition for branding consistency, for creating reading, and for unifying multiple pages. So, for example, now, if you look at this particular slides I use for my classes here, from the previous one and up to right now, it's the same structure and layout for the slides, right? Just few tweaks here and there, but the framework itself is standard. The colors, the size of the headline, the size of the body text, the way the list is, with footnote and the extra notes, the same design, right? Not because I cannot do more than this, but I just want to have that sense for this is this class, this is business academy, particular office, particular thing. And that's how it works, right? Repetition is very, very key and makes your work look professional and memorable. So just wait to connect that particular dot part time when you encounter a particular piece of work for a particular brand or business. Repetition is very, very key. But just to portray that point on repetition, let's look at these daily examples from a single brand, right? You can see consistency even without them being about the same thing per time, right? You see the consistency of colors, you see the consistency of the fonts used for the typography, you see the consistency in the design elements, right? The circular shapes, also the blurs in some of the background, right? Even the logo also is consistent. So it points to that across multiple touch points. It can be as simple as you repeating logos, as simple as you repeating colors, as simple as you repeating a font, right? And it can be as complex as you able to use a couple of other things just to ensure that you have repetitive. But for example, you see that even for the image, the models used in the image, the color of what they are wearing is consistent. It's either a light green or a deep green. It's intentional. That's not the actual color of the image. You have to like tweak it to fit to that brand. Okay, that's how it works. For example, you can't be working on a brand like MTN or the models are being green, they're wearing red. That's not how it works. That's to fit into the brand that is MTN. Get my points now. So repetition is very, very key. It's a principle when it comes to graphic design. Moving forward from this particular principle, let's move to the next one, which is proportion. Okay, proportion. Now, proportion is the size relationship between elements. It sounds fancy, but it's just for you to understand that it's a size per time for what is being spoken about or being communicated in visuals, right? So for example, now headlines will definitely be bigger than body text. Very simple. That's like very basic explanation. Headlines are bigger than the body text, right? And images also should fit their purpose. Like the example I showed in the previous image, you see the headlines are bigger compared to the body text, and the images are also fitting to what's being communicated in that particular visual, right? Now, also, you want to ensure that the relationships are logical and pleasant to the eyes. You don't want the text to be too big and too small, right? Also, the images should not be too big or too small, depending on what you're trying to communicate per time. It's all about communication, okay? It's all about communication. Sometimes you have the size very, very big, like very, very big, because you're trying to communicate with something similar to a poster design, then it can work. Or if you're trying to blend the text into the background or something like that, it can work. The idea is for you to understand what you're doing per time and communicate it that manner. If you're doing a billboard, communicate it that manner. You're doing a carousel, communicate it that manner. You're trying to do a poster, a flyer, communicate in that manner. Try to create a social media post also, communicate in that manner. So about the communication and also about the brand. Very, very key, right? And then for deeper or clearer illustrations of the particular point about proportion, you see this other example. You see the headline, which is you says experience youth deliveries, and the body text is ship so. Rather, you see the image just complementing what is being said, the design. Another element around it just complements that. Okay, what you're trying to do is first, the angular design of the shapes, the rectangles, the angular designs for them is just to illustrate and denote that the brand itself, actually delivers swiftly and fast. That's like the old idea. So they're not there by chance for just by we didn't want to put in those empty spaces. They're actually doing a particular work of expressing that we deliver shift deliveries. Get the points now. That's how it works. So everything you're putting in your design has to be in proportion, right? And as I mentioned before, as you begin to apply these principles and you will begin to come into deeper knowledge about them, begin to see them in application in many things you explore. So before you just see flares and you just say they are nice, then begin to see why they are nice. Begin to say exactly what is told. Okay, this is what was applied. The law of emphasis, the principle of proportion, the principle of balance, principle of contrast. This begins to give you deeper meaning to what you see and how you may experience inside your everyday life. You understand? On the next point, which is a principle 6, is alignment. Okay, alignment. Now, alignment visually helps you to organize elements along common edges or centers. And you've worked with alignments before, more often than not. Especially if you type on your phone, right? For example, your WhatsApp types towards the left, right? But when you're typing on Microsoft Word, types towards the left, and it also changes to the center or to the right. And the way you're writing, also you write from the left to the right. That's the left alignment already. So the medicine that I'm saying right now, that you already wrote them or you do them already, but you don't know the name that is attached to that, or you have not expressed them in that particular manner. So alignment is very, very key. It organizes elements in your designs to the particular edge or center. Now, when I say edge, you can be to the left edge or to the right edge or then center. And I'll show you an example in a minute. Now, you have to understand that alignment helps you to create order, helps you to create connection between elements, and then professionalism. If your alignment is off, your entire design will be off. You don't want too much spacing between your designs, and you don't want too much off alignment with your elements across your visuals. Okay, so let's show you an example to show you what I'm trying to say. Now, look at this particular designs, right? You have one that says left alignment, you have one that says center alignment. Now, for the left alignment, of course, the alignment is towards the left, towards your left. You see the headline towards the left, the superbedding towards the left, the body text towards the head. towards the left, and then also the footer text also towards the left. But for the center element, everything is towards the center. Like at the center, I mean now, everything is down right through the center. From the heading to subheading to the body text to the footer text, everything is towards the center. So that's just two different types of alignments. The same thing is being communicated in each of the designs, but the alignment is different from each other. You understand the points now? So you have left alignment, you have center, and you also have right alignment. Because right alignment is not here, but just can guess what that would look like also for right alignment. So that's all about alignment. It's all about you organizing elements across a particular edge, or even down through a center. That said, let's move now to real-life applications of these principles and fundamentals. Now, if you missed the last class where we spoke about the fundamentals of graphic design, you definitely missed a lot. You should go back and watch the video so you can be familiar with the fundamentals, and then so you can add that to the ledger for today, which is the principle. So both the fundamentals are principle are important for you to design in real life. Okay, so let's get into what we have tonight, talking about the real life applications of the principles and the fundamentals of design. So the first exploration I want to have tonight is designing a flyer. So look at an example of an online training flyer. So right, apply the principle of balance. You have it as you have the title at the top. That's a principle, right? So you have the title at the top, you have the details, the middle, and then maybe the registration link at the bottom. Now also, when it comes to the colors, you're using like 2 steady colors max, right? And then you ensure that they're complementary colors, of course, not just using colors. Remember I mentioned about how that contrast has to be put a check when choosing colors and choosing the sizes as well. Right, and then for contrast, you're making a class name on the team, the largest part of that design for the people that gets the information as well, right? And then for space, applying the principle of the fundamental of space, you have to ensure that it's breathing room around your text. And then for alignment, you are lining up all the text to the center or to the left. They're not scattered on around, right? And for typography, you have bold title for the title. So the bold fonts for the title and then simple fonts for the details. That's for the typography. So you have the balance, you have the colors, you have the contrast, you have the space, you have the alignments, you have the typography. It's a real-life application of what a flyer would be exploring as principles and fundamentals. And then just to have an example of what that would look like in designing, you have something that looks like this. Title, everything is in check. The fundamentals and the principles are applied to the design to make it look the way it looks. Okay, and then moving forward from that, let's look at another exploration of a real-life application of the principles and the fundamentals of design. The next one I want to explore is a logo design. Okay, so it's Small Business logo, right? So you have a shape, of course, as I mentioned before, called shape under fundamentals, right? You want to use a shape that reflects the business. So, for example, you use a circle that be something relating to a community, right? And if you use like a triangle, it's probably relating to growth, right? And then for colors, of course, you're picking colors from nature that match feeling. Depending on what you're trying to denote, right, or exude. So we have calm blues for like the sky, right, and then you have something like oranges, right, energetic oranges for like sunrise. Just communicates warmness and energy. You understand? Like just depending on what you're trying to communicate, pick the color on that basis. And then for simplicity, also you're looking at keeping everything simple, memorable, and clear. And then for proportion, of course, you're looking at ensuring that everything looks good if they are small. So you ensure that logo looks good, even if it's small, like on a business card. And when it's large, like on the keyboard, it still looks good. It's a principle of proportion. And then for repetition, the principle of repetition, you're using the same logo everywhere for brand recognition. You can see that these things actually being applied in real life, not just theory that you just keep in your pockets. It actually can be applied right now to whatever you're doing as a designer. Okay, and just to show you what that will look like, you have 2 logos here. One is for a community. It's not a business per se, just an initiative or a community. Founders Portal. And then you have another one that says this is a palette, which is actually a business. Which is actually a business, right? That sells, that's into food and the likes. Okay. So you see the color being used and makes you that okay, wants to eat, and then the font is a bit playful, just to communicate that that vibe, right? So how you can apply the principles and the fundamentals in real life. And of course, the last part I will look at right now is social media design for a travel business. So apply the principle of emphasis. You make the traveler, which is the hero of that particular brand, to be the largest elements, right? And of course, you're using complementary colors from that particular brand or your design. And that space, of course, you don't want to crowd everywhere with text or with image. You also allow the image and the text to breathe. And then for the typography, you have one clear message, bold and readable. Then the contrast, light text on dark image, or vice versa. It can be a darker image on the light text, whichever way works, right? Just for ensure that you have clear contrast between your text and your background. That's the whole idea. And to show you what that would look like for a travel business as an Instagram post, I have these two business from Knoxville, which is a travel business, right? The first one says traveling to Ibadan this week, and then the other one is about preparing the journey. Don't enjoy it. The point is for you to ensure that all these principles and fundamentals can actually be applied in real life, and you can see them right now in your faces. So the more you understand them, the more you begin to see them across multiple designs. As I actually put in real life examples of what they actually look like, applying the fundamentals, the principles to designs in real life. Okay, that's how it works. But if I were post on, I don't show you a couple of common mistakes you have to avoid as a designer in your field. Don't make these mistakes at all. First one is you using too many fonts. I want to stitch 2 or 3 fonts max. Okay, 2 or 3 fonts max per design, of course. Right. And then you want to crowd out the space. You want to ensure that there's space around what you're doing. So the images you're choosing, the text you're choosing, there's the space around them. And then also poor color contrast more you have to do. As I mentioned before, when you're explaining the principle of contrast, you want to ensure that your text is very readable. The color, the size, everything has to ensure that what is being communicated is very, very clear. Right? And then the other part is you want to ignore alignment. The more you ignore alignment, the more your design looks weird. Right? If you're using left alignment, let's take the left alignment. If you're using center, let it be centered. If you're using right, let it be right. Everything has to be straight and valid. Okay? Then also, you don't just copy without understanding principles. And the whole essence of me having these two classes as theoretical as they may be is because they are very, very key in you understanding whatever we're going to put forward. Alright, because by the time I come for the next class, it's just me going into the full-on practical, and I just assume that you already know the principles. So I don't have to explain them move on over again. That's the whole essence of these classes. Okay? Now, also, you don't want to just use any kind of image. Your images have to be very, very clear, not pixelated. Right? Use high-quality images for time. Right? And the thankfully for the evolution of AI, and easily generate images that you would need. I'll probably get to that in some other parts, so I can show you how you can actually generate AI images that actually work well for whatever you're trying to do, can decide. Okay, and then also ensure that you're making everything. You don't make everything the same size. There has to be hierarchy, right? Headline should not be as big as the body text. That's the difference between them. So hierarchy is very important. And also, don't forget who the audience is, right? If you're communicating for a brand that is much more geared towards a serious demography, you also communicate in that manner. And if you're communicating to a younger demography like children, right, you also communicate in that manner, much more playful, and then the vibe is like much more appealing compared to a much more serious brand. So there are all ideas for you to keep in mind what's your doing part-time. As I mentioned before, design is visual communication, and let's communicate in that manner, right? So that's how it works. And that is what we are for tonight, talking about the principles of design. And you applying these principles and the previous class about the fundamentals would actually help you to begin to understand much more than ever before how the world of design actually works, and how you can actually begin to get much better as a designer as you explore, as you practice, and as you put these things into action. Gets way, way better than you ever imagined, right? And of course, if you have any questions, you have a platform for that, probably questions on the platform. We'll definitely attend to them as much as I can, right? And that's all we have for tonight. And I would see you definitely in next class.